Hey plant pals, it's Daniela from California Carnivores, and today we're going to do a deep dive into the world of Drosera Gemmae. And that is such a fun topic to me because there are two main magic tricks that happen in the winter at California Carnivores. All the temperate plants go to sleep in the winter, so the Sarracenia, the flytraps, a lot of the Drosera, they go to sleep. And it's very boring and I don't like it, and it's cold and it's awful, but it's worth it because there are two big magic tricks. The tuberous sundews start to grow, which is unbelievable to watch. And the other big magic trick is that the Pygmy Sundews start to form Gemmae. And from these Gemmae, they make so many new plants that form so rapidly. It is like watching a magic trick. And I love getting to be a part of that. So this video today will be about what Gemmae are, how they work, how you can use them, and a lot of frequently asked questions about Gemmae. So in front of you, I have a bunch of Pygmy Sundews, a bunch of Gemmae in pots in various stages of growth, and we're going to go through all of this today. So something you may not realize is that for years, I answered all of the emails here at California Carnivores. So I've seen all of your questions, and I actually run the majority of our social media. So between Allison, our amazing office manager who now handles all of your emails, and myself, we see all the questions. So I know all of your questions about things like the Gemmae and the Pygmy Drosera and how they work. So I have a good idea of the information that you need to be successful, and also just your curiosity about these amazing plants and what this even is. Because I know there's a bunch of you who are like, why do you keep saying that word? What are you talking about? What is Gemmae? So let's start on this subject, which I love, I'm very obsessed with, and it's just super cool. All right, so let's talk about the actual Gemmae and what it is. Pygmy Sundews come from Australia. And they're really interesting little plants. They never get very big. You can see I have a selection of mature plants here. Some of them are a little bit on the taller side. Some of them stay super, super tiny. And almost all of them make Gemmae. And the Gemmae are something that actually you see in bryophytes more commonly. You don't generally see them in plants. And Gemmae is actually a form of asexual reproduction. And I have discovered over the years that when I say that, people are actually not helped by that. A lot of people tell me, well, okay, I don't really know any more now than before you said that statement. What does that even mean? And I find that's because a lot of people don't really think that flowers have sexual reproduction, and that's really what flowers do. So when you make seeds from one flower to another, when you have pollination and you combine genetics, that is actually sexual reproduction in plants. You know, it's like a little bit of a naughty subject, but that's what that is. All right, and so that is not what this is. And part of that is because when you combine the two different genetic strains, you're making seeds, and those seeds have a lot of variability in the genetics. You're gonna see a little bit more variability in the plants you make, right? That's really fun. Gemmae are totally different. They're asexual reproduction. There is no combination of two different parents. Actually, the plant itself is going to make a little clone. And that clone is actually really fascinating. This is why I love it. It's a fantastic idea in nature, and it's kind of ingenious when you think about it, because the Gemmae are actually vegetative buds that the plant makes. It's actually a modified leaf, and this vegetative bud contains an embryo and an energy pack. I think of it like a little tiny paratrooper just strapped on the top of the plant, ready to go. And all plants want to make copies of themselves. They want to spread. That's a biological force of nature, and in fact, all animals want to do it too. I think we all have that in common. And the Gemmae are an excellent way for these plants to spread. So let's talk about what Gemmae look like, and then I'll talk about what they do. So you can see on the top of these plants here, this is the Gemmae. A lot of the times people ask me, how do I know what Gemmae look like? So these are the carnivorous leaves here, and this is the Gemmae on the top. You can see it looks really, really different. And while there are different forms of Gemmae that look slightly different, you will always know that it's Gemmae because the Gemmae always looks different. So the Gemmae will form on the top of the plant, on the crown. And again, remember, it's a modified leaf. And the Gemmae usually start to form in winter as the photoperiods shorten and the colder temperatures set in. So the plant knows it's winter, it's time to make copies of myself. So they make these little vegetative buds, and they start to form on the crown. And as they start to form, they start to fill out. Just like the leaves would, they start to push out from the center of the crown of the plant. And you can really see it on this plant right here. You can see the various amounts of Gemmae on these. Some have a lot, some have a little, and basically these are all starting to push out. Now, this is the really cool, ingenious part. Not only are the Gemmae little paratroopers ready to spread to get out there, but how are they paratroopers? Well, that is because these plants have the Gemmae in these tight little buds. And as they push out, they're pushing out against something called a stipule. And you can actually see the stipules on these plants right here. The stipules are these little white leaves here, and they're a little bit more rigid. And the stipules get ratcheted back by the tension of those Gemmae pushing and growing. And as the Gemmae push out, it causes tension, kind of like a mousetrap. Think about that. So as the Gemmae ripen, they sort of push out and they ripen against those stipules, and it creates all this tension. And I swear, the longer you look at them, you can feel the tension. You can look at them and see it. And the reason they do that is in nature, when the rains would come, the raindrops would hit all of those Gemmae that are tightly held by this tension, and that would release the tension. And the Gemmae would spring off the top of the plant, which is crazy to think about. And they can go as far as 2 meters from the mother plant, which again, is kind of bananas when you look at how small these plants are. Think about how much tension is held between the stipules and the Gemmae to push them that far off. And wherever they land, they start to form a little root and grow leaves. And that's why I call them a little paratrooper, because they have their little backpack. They have their energy source, they have their embryo, and they're ready to grow. And this is where the magic of it is, because they start to form plants in a matter of weeks. I swear you can watch it happen practically overnight. So you can see in these pots, I have some Gemmae that were freshly sown, and you can even start to see some of the plants forming. And then I have different stages of these plants growing. And one of the fun things about carnivorous plants is they almost always form these miniature versions of themselves as they grow, even from seeds. But the Gemmae particularly, you can see, look, these leaves right here, I don't know if you can see this, they're sticky, they're already carnivorous. That is such an amazing way for this plant to spread itself in nature when it's a good moment. They grow in a very harsh environment. When you think about southwestern Australia, that's a rough place to grow if you're a tiny little plant, especially because it's incredibly hot in summer. In fact, they go summer dormant, most of them, to protect themselves from the heat. So when those winter rains come, the Gemmae are a wonderful way for them to spread incredibly rapidly, to grow quickly, to start to eat, and to be able to spread their genetics quickly. One of the frequently asked questions I get would be, do they make seed? And they do. They have stunningly beautiful flowers. They flower en masse. They can be shockingly large flowers for such small plants, and they will make seed. In cultivation, they are a little tricky to actually pollinate, and they don't tend to make a lot of seed. When they do make those seeds, there are some species that make a lot of seed, but they're a tough seed maker. They're not that easy, and they also are a little bit hard to germinate. So it seems that the Gemmae is the easiest way to cultivate them, both in nature and for the hobbyist or the horticulturist. So that was where it brings me to what the benefit for you is. Gemmae are fun and an easy way for you to spread your plants and make more. So that's the thing that people ask also. How do I harvest it? When do I know it's time to harvest? What do I do with it? And those are all really good questions. And it's a little bit variable. So this is gonna be where you're gonna have to put on like your planty hat and start to really get in tune with your plant. One little tip I'll give you is that while these Gemmae that I've just sown will turn into fully functioning plants in the first year, they rarely make Gemmae that first year. So if you have a new plant, don't stress out if it's not making Gemmae the first year. It usually takes a year to get up enough energy to do that. So when you see the Gemmae start to form in winter, when the photo periods start to shorten and it gets colder, you'll notice they start to form in the crown of the plant, but don't start to harvest them right away. The time frame is a little bit variable. They actually are pretty forgiving, but if you harvest them too early, they may not work out. If you harvest them too late, you have the chance of them rotting on the plant or even growing on the plant itself. You should check out our Instagram because I always post pictures, because inevitably I always miss somebody, and somebody starts to sprout on the crown of the plant, and it's pretty cool looking. So you do want to try and time it right. So for reference, we're in the US, so we're a little bit backwards from where they would grow normally, but in October, we often start to see the Gemmae form, and I often do the work in late December, January. And so I start harvesting them, and I start sprinkling them on soil, and that's a good time frame to do it. But you really have to watch your plants and to get a feel for what they look like. And my best tip is when you look at them, they're usually really pushed out, they're fully formed on the crowns, and you can almost feel the tension. It's like you can feel that they're ready to just spring forth off the top of the plant, and that's when they're ready to harvest. There are different shapes of Gemmae, and one other one is there's an arrowhead shaped one that you often see on patens and Tigula, and those can even start to come loose on the plant itself. That's another good sign it's ready to go. So just harvest it in mid to late winter, and that's when it's going to be ready. But again, you're probably just going to kind of have to follow your plant's lead, do some trials and errors, and even if you harvest them a little early, they're still shockingly effective at making plants, because these plants, they want to make copies of themselves, and Gemmae are a great way to do that. So this is where you're just going to have to experiment a little bit. Now, the next one I get is, how do you harvest it? People have all sorts of ways. There's all sorts of aspirators that people use where they actually suck the Gemmae up because they're tiny and they're delicate. And if you go to the International Carnivorous Plant Society's website, there's actually a lot of really great resources there. They have fantastic lists of all the species of Pygmy sundews, and they also have some great tips on different ways to harvest. The method I use is the one that Damon taught me, and I like it. It's simple and it works. So you're gonna laugh because every time I tell people this, they think it's just too simple. But I just wrap the pot in a towel, and this is the pro tip. So the pot's sitting in water, so when you're actually harvesting Gemmae, it's really common for the pot to just drip water, which, oh, no big deal, except that the Gemmae will stick together when they're wet, and then you will curse yourself because it's incredibly difficult to work with them when they're like that. So I'll just get one of our nursery rags, I'll wrap the pot in it, and then Damon and I both really like to use paper. We like to use white paper, because then you can really see the Gemmae you're working with. He has this like fantastic, practically origami way that he like folds a piece of white paper to fit perfectly in like this plastic nursery tray that I have never, ever been able to do. So I just use a paper bowl or paper plate. That works for me because I can still fold it when I want to. And you're gonna laugh. But I just wrap it in the towel, and then I gently turn it over, and then I just tease the Gemmae off with my fingers. It's not that high tech, I know. But I like it because as someone who works with plants every day, I never wear gloves. I want to feel it. It's just, for me, I can tell what's going on better. More than that, Gemmae are very delicate. Remember we talked about the fact that the Gemmae are these vegetative buds? They're not a seed. They don't have a seed coat. They don't have a hard shell. They're very soft tissue. And if you are not delicate with them, you are going to harm them, and they probably aren't going to work. So I prefer to use my fingers because it can be light, it can be delicate, I can feel what's happening. And it's just, that's the tool of my trade personally, so it works. So one other pro tip is if you're going to use forceps, some people like to use like little tweezers or forceps to harvest the Gemmae. You can totally do that, but that's how you're going to hurt your Gemmae. If you're going to crush them, it's going to be with those. So be really thoughtful about that, because like we just said, they're very soft. They're soft tissue. And oftentimes also the Gemmae, when you're trying to collect it, will get stuck in the dewy tentacles of the sundews. So it's usually pretty easy to just flick that out with your fingers, or pry that out with a really gentle use of forceps. So you can get all the Gemmae pretty easily. Also, you'll find that you'll get all of the Gemmae off, and more will continue to come. So just keep checking back. Don't ever give up on your plant until really spring, because you will be shocked how much Gemmae a single Pygmy sundew will produce, and you can make so many new plants off of those Gemmae. Once you have collected those Gemmae, you'll notice you have like so much in this little tray, and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do with this? So once you've collected them, you may want to send them to a friend, or share them with people. Don't wait. This is a really important thing. Gemmae, again, are not something that's gonna last. You need to use them pretty quickly, and if you're gonna send them to a friend, be sure to mail them like immediately, and don't enclose them in too wet of a paper towel. Sometimes I see that happening. People mail them to friends in a really sopping wet paper towel, and that can be difficult because if the Gemmae, they can rot in that environment. And also, if you wait too long to send them, and you send them in a wet paper towel, they are going to grow into that paper towel, and that is very difficult to extricate a single tiny plant with an itty bitty little root without just destroying the whole thing. So if you're going to harvest your Gemmae, get yourself set up to use it right away, mail it right away, whatever you're gonna do, don't let it sit. So when I'm harvesting the Gemmae every winter, it's like a whole process where like everybody knows, well, I guess she's gonna be doing that for a while, because I don't want it to sit. It's really important. So once I have my Gemmae harvested, then it's the fun part. So I have a pot, which I have like this one. And we like to use a kind of deeper pot because they actually have a pretty substantial long root, because where they would grow naturally, they're trying to get to a lower water table to survive the summers. And you're gonna want to use a mix of 4 parts peat moss and perlite like us. And we like to pack these in very, very tightly. Pack your soil in extremely well, because you're going to surface sow your Gemmae. You're not going to be disturbing this at all. And if you don't pack it in extremely tightly, it's just going to sink and it's going to just be kind of a pain for you. The other pro tip I have for you is you want the surface to be very smooth, because these are tiny, the way they grow, they don't get big. You really don't want any sort of chunks on the top. If I see little bits of perlite that are big or little chunks of the soil that are big, I actually pick those all off with my forceps before I even work, and I tend to just smooth the soil out really carefully before I even bother sprinkling. You're just going to have a better effect later. Then it's really just how you want to sprinkle them. So Damon has a method, again, another one I have not mastered super well. He uses a folded piece of paper, just a regular piece of printer paper. He puts the Gemmae in it, folds it down lengthwise, and then he is able to hold it and just tap, 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 tap. And as he taps, he patiently waits as the Gemmae march down, and they just gently march down the fold of the paper to the opening, and then they just pop right out on the soil. And it's kind of like ants marching. And he's really dexterous at it, and he's able to then carefully just move his paper around and pop his Gemmae wherever he wants. I have never managed that super well, so I have a slightly different method, kind of similar. I do use a tapping method or a sprinkling method. And then a pro tip is that the Gemmae adhere to wetness. So if I want to move my Gemmae around because they've landed in a clump, I actually just use a sharpened pencil. And if you dip that pencil in water, Gemmae adhere to wetness. And so then you can gently move the Gemmae around by lightly touching it with the tip of the wet pencil, and you can just move it around the soil super easily. Again, don't press hard, don't want to hurt anything, but that's how I do it. I just move it around. I like to sprinkle it though, rather than regimentedly put it in place, because I want it to look a little more natural. I like it when they're all clumped up like they would be in nature, but that's totally personal. You can make a beautiful pattern. And that's it. That's all you do. Then you just wait, and it's super fun. I think I just got dripped on. Did you guys see that? That's nursery life right there. So you just wait. In the nursery here, we would put them on a sunny table, sitting in water, and just watch and wait. If you're gonna do this at home, you're gonna wanna put them in a very sunny windowsill, but honestly, I would probably put them under grow lights, not really close, that'll just destroy them, you know, a good foot or two from the lights, depending on the strength of your lights. That's a little hard because these lights nowadays, there's like 100,000 lights and they're all different strengths. Again, you're gonna have to put your planty eyes on and really watch, but under grow lights and always sitting in water, and just watch them grow. And they'll just grow. They're just gonna go for you. It's really exciting. Now let's talk about some of the other questions that people ask me about. They ask me, like, why would you want to do this? What is the benefit as the horticulturalist or the hobbyist? Not only is this a prolific way to make new plants, for instance, every winter I harvest every Gemmae I can, I make brand new pots, and then I make lots of pots for you guys, and that's how we make our Pygmy Sundews to sell. But there's a couple reasons. One, Pygmy Sundews are actually not the longest lived plants on this earth. They're not gonna live for decades and decades and decades. They live a few years and then they die. They're a cycle. They're a cycling plant. And so if you want to keep them in your collection for a long time, you want to harvest that Gemmae every year and make a new plant, a new pot every year, so you can keep having it. The other thing about Pygmy Sundews is that they're a little fussy about transplanting. So once they've actually grown into a full-sized plant, they have that nice root in there, and you could be so gentle. You could be so special. You could say so many loving prayers. If you were to transplant all of these into a new pot, you would have a very high mortality rate, no matter how well you did it, no matter how much planty magic you put on it. It's just the nature of these plants. They don't like to be moved. Some plants do not like their roots to be messed with. So if you have Pygmy Sundews and you love them and you've thought, oh, you know what, I want to make a Pygmy Sundew terrarium, or I want to add these to my outdoor bog, the Gemmae are going to be a really easy way to do that, because you don't have to worry about transplanting them. And if you do decide to transplant them when they're potted, it's best just to leave them in the full pot and just dig a hole the size of the pot and just chunk the whole pot in, take the pot off, but chunk the whole bit of soil in so you don't disturb the roots. But again, Gemmae season's a great time. You can collect all your Gemmae, you can sprinkle them in your terrarium because they are excellent terrarium plants considering they don't get very big and they flower and they are just so stunning, and they will continue to fill that terrarium. So as they die back with time, new ones will fill up your terrarium, which is a really fun system. And then if you have a really nice environment for a bog where it doesn't drop, you know, if it doesn't freeze too often, you can easily grow them outside in your bog. We're in zone 9B here in California, and I grow them outdoors year round in my bog. And every year I always have a few extra Gemmae, like the random ones that I like maybe didn't like label and like don't remember fully what they are. So then I can't fully prop them out. And so then I just take those home and I sprinkle them in my bog every year. And it's so fun because I get a beautiful glowing carpet of Pygmy Sundews underneath my Sarracenia, which catch a shocking amount of bugs actually. So that's the benefit of these plants and the benefit of the Gemmae. So I think that's all I can think about for the Gemmae right now. I'm trying to think. I think that's it. I have a ton more information on Gemmae, probably burning a hole in my brain right now, probably pushing out 3rd grade math. But if you guys have more questions, if you have comments, if you want to tell me about your Gemmae experience, comment below. I love answering all of your questions. I just sit there with my coffee in the morning and answer all the questions on YouTube. And I have lots more to say. So we'll do some more videos too later on through the winter so we can show you more like how hands-on how to do actual Gemmae. We'll collect some, we'll show you all that process. And I hope you guys have a wonderful planty day.